If you have started to suspect that your spiritual awakening is fading, that the lights are dimmer, the messages quieter, the synchronicities less dramatic than they used to be, you're about to learn something that almost no modern teacher will say out loud. Carl Jung spent decades studying the people who arrived at his door after the Great Opening, and he discovered something the spiritual industry has spent the last 50 years hiding from you. An awakening is not a permanent state. It was never meant to be. The dazzling phase you have been calling your awakening was actually the doorway, not the destination. And the day comes, sometimes quietly, sometimes without you noticing for weeks, when the awakening as a phase finishes its work and ends. Most people who reach that moment panic. They assume something has gone wrong. They mistake the closing of one stage for the loss of everything they fought to receive. They spend years trying to recreate the lights and the visions and the breakthroughs, when in fact something far rarer and far more valuable has quietly arrived in their place. Jung gave this stage a name almost no modern teacher dares to repeat, because the spiritual industry cannot sell what comes after awakening. They can only sell the awakening itself. By the end of the next few minutes, you are going to know exactly how to tell whether your awakening is truly over, whether what you are experiencing is the closing of the door behind you, and what is forming in its place that no peak experience could ever have given you. Because if you are watching this video, the 7 signs I'm about to describe have probably already started in your life. And until someone names them, you have no way of knowing that what feels like an ending is actually the most important arrival of the entire path. Almost everyone teaching spirituality online today wants you to believe the awakening is the goal. They sell the lights, they sell the visions, they sell the synchronicities, and they sell them again and again, because the awakening market depends on you staying in the awakening phase forever. But Jung saw what happens after, and he understood that the people who actually transform are the ones who let the awakening end. The 7 signs I'm about to describe are not symptoms of decline. They are evidence of completion. So if any of these have started in your life, do not be afraid. Listen carefully, because something inside you has just finished its work. The first sign is the one that frightens people the most when they finally admit it out loud. The synchronicities have stopped dazzling you. During the awakening, they arrived in dazzling clusters, demanding your attention, making you feel chosen, making you feel like the universe itself was speaking directly to you in code. Now they have quieted. They still arrive, but they arrive softly, almost privately, on the exact day you need them, in the exact form you need them, without fanfare. You see a number you used to chase, and now you barely look up. A book falls open to a page that answers a question you have not voiced, and instead of taking a photograph, you simply close the book and feel the answer settle into your bones. This is not the universe abandoning you. This is the universe trusting you. During the awakening phase, the messages had to be loud because you were not yet listening properly. Now, you are listening properly. The signs no longer have to shout, and the fact that they have stopped shouting is the surest evidence that your inner ears have grown wide enough to hear what was always being said. The second sign is the one Jung saw most often in his patients, and it is the sign that confused them the most. The urge to tell people what is happening to you has dissolved. During the awakening, you wanted to tell everyone. You wanted to send the article, recommend the book, describe the dream, explain the realization, tag the friend, post the synchronicity. The fire inside you needed witnesses. It needed echoes. It needed to be reflected back to confirm itself. Now the fire has settled into a steady, quiet warmth, and warmth does not require witnesses. You read the article and keep it to yourself. You finish the book and place it back on the shelf without a single recommendation. You have the realization and let it pass through you the way breath passes through your lungs, without ceremony, without announcement. This is not isolation. This is sufficiency. The version of you that needed external mirrors to feel real has dissolved into a version that already feels real to itself. And that version does not need to convince anyone of anything, because the convincing is no longer the point. The third sign arrives in your decisions. Your intuition has lowered its voice. During the awakening, intuition spoke loudly, urgently, dramatically, sometimes interrupting your thoughts mid-sentence with a certainty that felt almost like possession. Now it speaks at the volume of an ordinary friend in an ordinary room. It is conversational. It is calm. It is woven into your normal thinking instead of breaking through it. You will catch yourself making decisions without remembering when the decision was made. You will turn down a street without knowing why and find exactly the thing you needed at the end of it. You will say no to an invitation that part of you wanted to accept, and only weeks later realize what you avoided. The intuition has not weakened. It has integrated. It is no longer a separate voice fighting for attention. It is the entire integrated self, speaking in its own native tongue. And when intuition speaks at this volume, you no longer second-guess it. You no longer need to. The line between intuition and self has dissolved. The fourth sign happens in the night. The dreams have calmed. During the awakening, your dreams were vivid, symbolic, sometimes terrifying, sometimes breathtaking, often impossible to ignore. You woke with sentences in your mouth, with imagery you could not shake for days, with the certainty that something inside you was being rearranged at a speed your conscious mind could barely keep up with. Now the dreams have settled. They still arrive. They still speak. But they no longer break you open. They no longer wake you at 3 a.m. with the urgency of a fire alarm. They speak to you the way an old friend speaks to you across a kitchen table. Slowly, clearly, without theatrics. Sometimes you wake remembering only a feeling, and the feeling is enough. Sometimes you wake having understood something the dream did not have to dramatize. The unconscious is no longer dumping material into your conscious life all at once. It is depositing it gently, on a slower rhythm, the way rain feeds a field instead of a flood. Your psyche has stopped being a construction site. It has become a finished garden, still alive, still growing, but no longer being built. The fifth sign is the one almost nobody writes about, because it is the least dramatic, but it is the one Jung tracked most carefully in his patients. Your body has softened. The chronic low-grade tension that ran underneath your old life has dissolved. The fatigue that came in waves during the awakening has lifted. Sleep deepens. Digestion improves. Breath drops lower into your belly without you having to remind it to. You will notice that you stand differently. Your shoulders are lower than they used to be. Your jaw's not clenched at 3 p.m. You can sit alone in a room without your hand drifting toward your phone, your food, or any other small numbing. This is not a wellness routine. This is the result of an internal war that has finally ended. The parts of you that were trying to wake up have woken up. The parts of you that were resisting them have stopped resisting. The body, which always tells the truth, can finally lie down inside its own life. Now here is the sign that surprises you the most when you finally notice it. The urge to wake other people up has quieted. During the awakening, you could see clearly the conditioning around you. You could see who was sleepwalking. You could see who was suffering needlessly, and you wanted, with a kind of desperate love, to grab them by the shoulders and pull them through the same doorway you had just walked through. Now you no longer try, not because you have stopped loving them, because you have remembered what it cost you to walk through that doorway, and you know they cannot be hurried. They have to walk it on their own legs. They have to feel the strangeness on their own terms. They have to mistake it for malfunction first the way you did. They have to almost give up the way you almost did. Your respect for the timing of other people's lives has expanded into something that looks almost like reverence. You watch. You stay available. You do not knock on their door. And in the quiet patience of not knocking, you become exactly the kind of presence they will reach for when they are finally ready. And here is the seventh sign, the one Jung said was the rarest of all, and the one that confirms everything else has finished its work. Stillness has become your default state. Not stillness as the absence of activity, stillness as the ground beneath every action. You can argue with someone and remain still inside. You can lose something important and remain still inside. You can sit in a noisy room full of difficult people and find that the noise no longer reaches the deepest part of you. This is not detachment. This is integration. The seas above can rage as much as they want. The depths below have settled into a quiet that is not going to leave again. Most teachers will tell you that this stillness is the goal of awakening. Jung knew better. This stillness is the proof that the awakening has done its work and ended. The opening was the door. The strangeness was the corridor. The stillness is the room. And once you are in the room, the awakening you spent so much energy seeking does not need to be sought anymore. You are living inside what it was always pointing toward. Here is what Jung said almost no modern teacher will repeat. The closing of the awakening is more important than the awakening itself. Because what closes the door is the same thing that opens the room. What you have just walked through is what Jung called individuation completing its arc. The slow, strange, irreversible process by which the conscious self and the unconscious self stop fighting and become a single living whole. Before the awakening, your psyche was largely unconscious of itself. The ego ran everything. The shadow stayed in the basement. The deeper layers of the self were like a country you had never visited. The awakening was the moment the doors between those layers began to dissolve. The strange period after the awakening was the long, often painful, often disorienting work of letting everything underneath rise into the light. And what is happening now, the quieting of the synchronicities, the calming of the dreams, the softening of the body, the disappearance of the urge to convince others, the arrival of stillness, is the moment Jung named completion, the integration of the transcendent function, the point at which there is no longer a divided self trying to put itself back together because the self is already together. You do not lose your personality at this stage. You do not become some egoless cliché floating above the world. You become more yourself than you have ever been, but the ground of yourself has shifted. You are now standing on something deeper than personality, and from that ground, the daily life of an ordinary person becomes the daily life of someone who is quietly, structurally awake without needing to call it that. This is why Jung said the people who finished individuation almost never described themselves as enlightened. They had nothing to prove. They had no spiritual identity to defend. They had no awakening to recreate. They had simply arrived in the room their entire life had been pointing toward, and the arrival was so quiet, so unspectacular, so woven into the texture of ordinary moments that anyone who had not walked the corridor themselves would never have understood what had happened. The world is full of people in this state right now. You may have walked past 3 of them today. The signs are not visible from the outside. They are visible only in the absence of certain frantic energies that everyone else has not yet learned to live without. If any of these 7 signs have started in your life, hit subscribe and keep walking this path with me. And drop a single comment that says, "It's quiet now." That is all. No story, no explanation, just those 3 words. Because what you have just received was not written for everyone. It was written for the people who have already walked the corridor and who needed someone to finally name the room they have arrived inside. So if you have been waiting for your awakening to come back, for the dazzling phase to return, for the lights and the visions and the synchronicities to start shouting at you again, I want you to hear this clearly. They are not coming back. And that is the best news you have ever received. Because what is happening to you now is what every awakening was secretly trying to deliver from the beginning. Not the high, the home, not the storm, the ground after the storm, not the noise of the spirit shaking you awake. The silence of the spirit standing inside its own house, lights low, door closed, finally able to rest. Jung tried to tell us that the people who hold on to the awakening forever are the people who never quite let themselves arrive. They stay in the doorway, they keep relighting the candles, they keep reaching for the dream they once had instead of stepping into the life that dream was preparing them for. Do not do that. The awakening has ended. The 7 signs in your life are not a malfunction. They are the closing of a chapter so the next one can begin. And the next one is the chapter you are always supposed to live. It is quieter than you expected. It is less photogenic than you hoped. It is also more real, more grounded, more honestly your own than anything the spiritual industry could ever have sold you. You did not lose your awakening. You finished it. And now, for the first time in your entire life, you are free to live as the person it was building. So stop waiting for the storm to return. Stop trying to recreate the high. Stop interpreting the stillness as decline. Step into the room. The lights are dim because they no longer need to be on. The door is closed because there is nothing left to walk through. You are here. You are home. You have arrived inside the truth your entire awakening was carrying you toward, one strange and necessary day at a time.